Joining us by phone is Minister Greg Rickford from Kenora-Rainy River. It's James Murray with NetNewsledger. Joining us from the beautiful community of Kenora is Minister Greg Rickford. Greg, welcome to NetNewsledger again.
Well, James, it's always good to talk to you and your listeners and your viewers. You've done an extraordinary job of outreach across North and Northwestern Ontario, and I'm just happy to take the questions.
This has been a week of blame game politics, it seems. The Ford government is getting a beating out from the federal Liberals over Bombardier. What's the story, Greg?
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that they've decided to take this approach. Our thoughts are first and foremost with those workers, and we acted on that a little over a month ago. I came up to Thunder Bay and we issued a letter to the Unifor workers, visited the Bombardier plant, spoke at length with workers, union leaders, and management about our support for them. As you know, we announced at the time the intention to fast-track another 36 train cars, and that was at the request of Unifor in a meeting that the Premier had with the Unifor leader, Mr. Diaz, and the Thunder Bay chapter for Bombardier. So subsequent to that, obviously, we continue to pursue plans for a significant expansion of our transit in the GTA and beyond, and there wouldn't be any other place we would consider building those trains down the road than that plant. So the goal now, and everybody understood it, was to do what we could to keep as many jobs going, and that was appreciated by the community of Thunder Bay, in particular by the great Unifor workers that build world-class trains there. So the decision in the wake of an announcement that was widely expected for the federal government to carry on like this has two important features. One, welcome to the challenge here, and secondly, this is not how Northwestern Ontario politicians have traditionally dealt with these. I mean, James, you remember back in the day, Michael Gravel and I always put our partisan stripes aside and got down to the business of turning a challenge into a solution. I suppose if the federal government was wandering around and looking for something important to do on this file, it would be to press the Trump administration to lower the threshold for train production so that Bombardier could have access to other markets, because it's very difficult to sustain itself on the basis of Canadian orders. That said, we've been very clear from the outset. We have our plans for the expansion in transit are real. They're coming soon, and we're looking for unequivocal support before the election from the federal government to commit to that. That's all this is about. So, I hope that in the future, Minister Hajdu just takes a decidedly more cooperative approach to this. My door is always open to those kinds of discussions, and I'm not sure it adds much for the workers and their families and the great community of Thunder Bay that I spend a lot of time working with and working for a minister to bash other levels of government when the issues are more important and more complex than just a simple blame game.
Now, that's sort of almost what seems to be going on. It seems almost like the Justin Trudeau Liberals are campaigning against the Doug Ford Conservatives in the federal election.
Yeah, it's a strange way to campaign. Their opposition is the federal Conservative Party, and that's coming up soon. And I think that they should focus on who their real opposition is. If Ontario is part of their fixation, then commit to funding Ontario's historic $28.5 billion transit expansion plan. Commit to it for in the run-up to the election. That's a far more effective way to address and work with Toronto the our government than it is to point fingers. And listen, James, I'm pretty well attached to the Thunder Bay community, and I see the trends on social media and some of the discussion from people I have. I think there's a lot of disappointment that local federal politicians from the Liberal Party have decided to engage in a blame game with language that's not productive, sounds angry, and unjustified, when there's an opportunity just to commit to a straightforward plan that will ultimately lead to a scale of production or a requirement for trains coming out of Bombardier and Thunder Bay down the road that will get those workers back in that plant. That's what we're focused on. That's what Premier Ford has been focused on. That's why he dispatched me so quickly up there a month ago to do this. Our concern is for the workers in the community of Thunder Bay, rather than a blame game or an election that we won't be in on October 19th or whenever it is.
Greg, I think that takes care of a lot of it. One of the issues that has come up in my research is that Ontario has a very low, you mentioned the Americans having up to 60-70% American content, which is precluding Bombardier from contracts. Ontario has a very low Canadian content requirement, and that is something that should be addressed, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, the federal government obviously deals more on the trade front, but it wouldn't do Ontario any good to increase the thresholds to isolate ourselves from the opportunities across throughout the world. The solution is never points towards isolationism. It points to creating opportunities so that Ontario has access to the business, and so that's why it's critical that we address this matter with the United States. And certainly moving forward, if that's the case, we take a look at any and all plans for rail car construction to occur exclusively in Ontario. But I don't want to oversimplify this, James. I mean, one of the other frustrating elements to this is that, a lot of the cars that are actually built in the Thunder Bay Bombardier plant, the materials themselves come from the United States. In such a fashion, particularly with aluminum and steel, that they come from either American, in some instances Mexico. So in actual fact, their content would be met. The key issue is assembly. Yes. And the assembly thresholds are way too high. So we call on our federal government to get down to Washington and fight that. It's better for America. Bombardier's plan is a cost-competitive manufacturer of rail cars that purchases a lot of American materials to make them. It makes perfect sense that we would have access to their markets, be competitive, and this would work out better for both the United States and for Canada.
Greg, thank you very much for taking the time to talk.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.